Welcome to FUNC YOU UP, the podcast that gives you the best of functional medicine, nutrition, and wellness in 8 minutes or less.
Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist.
And this is Diana Orchant, functional medicine registered dietitian to be.
Welcome back to FUNC YOU UP. We have an awesome episode lined up for you. Today's topic is all about these artificial sweeteners, these kind of like fake sweeteners, where you find them, what they are, and more importantly, what they're doing to your body. So start me off, Diana, kind of break down artificial sweeteners or non-sugar sweeteners. What are these and where do we find them?
These artificial sweeteners are typically known as aspartame, asulfame, potassium, saccharin, sucralose, or you might better know them as found in these pretty little packets of Equal, Sweet and Low, Splenda, NutraSweet, sitting at your local coffee shop, or maybe it's even in your pantry. And they're essentially chemically made in a lab, and they are 300 to 500 times sweeter than your average table sugar.
So, I mean, that is sweet. Like, that is wild. And I think it's interesting to talk about how this has come to be, why this is such a big part of our diet culture. And I personally think it goes back to, sugar being addictive. We've talked about this in previous episodes. I think you said it was episode 22.
22, sugar.
So we know that sugar has these addictive properties, but I also think there's this interesting history of the diet culture where, first we thought, okay, fats are bad. And then there was this low fat fad that went through. And then after that, we realized, okay, sugars are bad. So now instead of just switching into foods that are naturally low in sugar or, eating a well-rounded diet, we thought, well, how can we keep this sweet, awesome, addicting taste, but not have the actual sugar, grams of sugar in this food? And I think that's where this demand came from. Scientists stepped up to the bat. They saw an opportunity to make a lot of money. And here we are now with all of these different artificially, chemically made, non-sugar sweetening agents.
Absolutely. And, it's really hard, I think, for a lot of us to get our head around this, right? Because we're trained to see no calories, low calorie, and think, oh, it's a free food. I can put in 5 Splenda packets in my coffee in the morning, or now we're adding it to our cereal and adding it to anything we can just because our brains are now craving that. But we're not realizing the downstream effects that these artificial sweeteners can really have on our bodies, right? Because we're living in the moment and we're seeing it's a free food, so why not?
And you're absolutely right. I think in like a calorie in, calorie out society, we are very much wrapped up in total calories and total grams of sugar, which, don't get me wrong, we are very much in support of limiting your sugar intake and consuming, foods low in sugar, but that doesn't mean turn to chemicals. It doesn't mean try to cheat the system or hack the system by using these chemicals. I think we just need to learn from Mother Nature. If it's not natural, it's probably not going to serve us well in the end. But some of these studies are crazy and I'm really passionate about getting this word out because it completely disrupts the mind, the thinking of even consuming these in the first place. So one thing that I think is really interesting, let's start out just talking about the effects that these artificial sweeteners have on our appetite, our cravings, and our metabolism. Because I think a lot of people turn to these when they're trying to lose weight or when they're trying to satisfy a craving, but don't want the calories.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, artificial sweeteners, as I said, they're so much sweeter than sugar. So it's now, we all were kind of like addicted to sugar, and now we're becoming addicted to artificial sweeteners and that insane taste that our mind and our brain is craving. So what's really interesting about this is that artificial sweeteners have actually been shown in studies to slow down our metabolism and actually trigger you to consume more calories and therefore gain weight. And I know that the reason for this is really because our brains so we're drinking that Diet Coke, right? And we are thinking, our brains are lighting up saying, thank you, I wanted that sugar. And we're not giving our brains that sugar. It's not real. So later on, you might be craving more actual sugar, more carbs to break down into sugar. And then
what do you do?
More and more.
Right. You just reach for more.
Right. Grab another Diet Coke, grab more, whether it's candy or carbs or anything of that nature, you're grabbing that and eating more and more of it. And what I hear people say so much of, that's not me. You know, I drink a Diet Coke on the side of my salad. It just might not be happening immediately.
So inside the body, all of these difficult, mechanisms are happening, all these different conversions of the body, these cellular processes, and your body is designed to take in sugars, break it down, and use it for energy. And so it's trying to it's signaled to still do that process, but all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, where's the sugar? Oh, it must be coming. Let's strengthen that signal of I want more sugar. Let's strengthen that hunger, or let's strengthen that craving. And when it's not getting it, finally it says, guys, we're not getting it. We better slow down the metabolism. We better start storing away fat, because there's a shortage. We're not getting this energy, this form of glucose as fuel. So a lot of studies have looked at this. One of my favorites was looking at, I think it was something around individuals who were consuming primarily artificial sweeteners were putting on 14% more weight, even though they weren't consuming as many calories. They were consuming less calories, but putting on 14% more body fat.
Mm-hmm.
How frustrating could that be? Here you're trying to do the right thing, cut out your sugar by using a diet soda or an artificial sweetener, and it actually ends up doing the opposite. So that's a big reason we wanted to get this out there, because this is very frustrating. But there's a lot of health ramifications of this too, oddly enough, with diabetes. So Diana, lead me through kind of how diabetes and blood sugar would be impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because diabetes, you think that it's this disease of eating too much sugar, right? And you would think that artificial sweeteners are a wonderful solution, but in fact, they're not for many reasons. But one that's really particularly geared towards diabetes is that it's been shown to increase insulin resistance in humans. So, it's, again, we're tricking our brains, and the more we're getting, the more insulin our body starts to produce. And remember, insulin's anabolic. It's a fat storing hormone, which is going to increase the amount of fat and the amount of calories that your body is looking for.
And exactly. So that animal study that I mentioned before, where basically the body was, there's this idea of like thermogenesis, it's heat in the body, and that's what helps with fat breakdown. It was decreasing thermogenesis, and that's why this weight was adding on. So here you are, you get into this like anti-weight loss place in your body where you're kind of triggering all of these things to store fat, make you feel hungrier, and you're probably gonna be tired and cranky because you're not getting enough of the proper energy.
Right, and then you crash and you reach for the Diet Coke again, so. So another thing to consider is that artificial sweeteners are a neurotoxin.
Okay, that's a scary word.
I know. It is. It's a scary thing. It means that it's a toxin to our brains.
Well, and it's interesting because we know sugar lights up reward pathways in the brain, and we know that these sweeteners can be anywhere from 200, 300 to 1,000 times sweeter than sugar. So we kind of are lighting up the brain already with with these flavorings, with these sugar receptors going crazy. But now understanding that it can really be toxic to your brain, to your neurons, to your nervous system. I mean, that is really when it starts to get scary to me. And I think that this is a big reason that this is such an addictive food product.
Yeah, and it's interesting because our palates shift, like, the reward pathways, they shift from wanting to enjoy the simple sweet things in life, such as berries and fruits and vegetables and the things that we're kind of primed to go for. We no longer want to go towards that. Our palate is now shifting towards wanting this intense sweetness that real food can't satisfy.
I also think I remember doing a capstone project on aspartame being a neurotoxin in my grad program, and there's a ton of research, which was awesome. But I think what was concerning to me is that aspartame is pretty well known at this point, and a lot of people know to look on ingredient lists for it. You know, they look on their diet sodas, or I know we keep picking on diet soda, but it can be in a lot of things. What I would like a takeaway from this episode to be is that asulfame potassium, or am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
Asulfame potassium.
ACE K.
ACE K. That is also something you need to be looking on your ingredient list for, just as much as you're looking for aspartame, because it is very similar in its neurotoxic effects. And I often think that if you're not in the nutrition field, you would see asulfame potassium, you'd see potassium and think, oh, like that's a good mineral, like that's in my bananas. And it's a completely different chemically derived, it's chemically made, it's made in a lab, it's completely fake. It's not a natural thing. This is certainly not good for you. Certainly not part of like an electrolyte blend. And that's really frustrating. Again, it's like these sneaky ways that these really toxic ingredients are getting put into our food and really being harmful to our bodies, and then also making us become addicted to them. I truly believe eventually these aren't going to be allowed in our food system anymore. We're seeing trends like that in the European countries already, and I think it's going to trend here. We're always a little bit slower to catch on to those things, but I'm hopeful. You were also mentioning that these types of things are in food items you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be in.
Right. It's crazy. They're in more and more packaged foods now, especially foods that are now saying low sugar, sugar-free. Like I always think of, you know, people reach for these candies now, like even a lot of sucking candies, sugar-free gums, things like that. But then what's
Great example
is that they're starting to now be in things like lean cuisines, things that you would really never think that there's even sugar added. Like it's supposed to be a savory meal. And then also it's in Pedialyte, which is pretty alarming, because that's kind of these like electrolyte blends that we would give to our children.
Yeah, pediatrics, exactly. It's in the name. That is a big concern. I would really encourage everyone just to start, you know, again, we always say read ingredients and read labels, but really be on the lookout for these, because that is not something you want to be giving to your little one, especially if they're not feeling well. Now, we're very passionate about gut health, and so once we started to dig a little bit deeper into this topic and realized its effects on microbiome and the gut health overall, I thought, okay, this is really adding fuel to my fire. I can't wait to rant about this. So start me out with some of the basics about what this is doing to the gut, or why this would be even an issue.
Yeah, so it's really changing the composition and function of our gut microbiome. And before we started taping this episode, Michelle and I were really diving into the research, and it is complex, and there are a lot of different moving pieces and facets to all of the research that's out there. But to sum it up for you, there have been quite a few animal studies that have shown that artificial sweeteners, sweeten low was specifically one of the, I'd say, worst / most fake sweet, interacted with the bacteria in our gut. And it really messed up how the mice in the studies could actually tolerate glucose and then manage their blood sugar over time. And so one thing that I really want to get across is that a lot of people will say, well, you know, when I drink a Diet Coke versus when I drink the Coke, and sorry, I'm going back and I'm always on the diet soda, but it's just so
easier to understand. Yeah.
But like when I drink the Coke, my blood glucose it shoots up immediately. Well, of course, that's what sugar does. But the Diet Coke or the artificial sweeteners have a more long-term detrimental effect.
But I think it does make sense in the way that, you know, of course, if diet soda had an immediate effect, it probably would have been more mainstream. It probably wouldn't have made it so mainstream. It's the fact that it took years of now researching and seeing the ramifications of this on the body to be alarmed by it. And I think that's so in touch with our society of like instant gratification and instant results. So as long as this doesn't have any calories in it right at this moment, I'm going to consume this. But what this is going to do to my body's ability to actually manage and balance sugar long term is a massive concern, kind of leading back to why it increases your risk for diabetes, and why it worsens people's, you know, individuals with diabetes, it worsens their conditions long term if they're on diet soda. But the gut health stuff was really crazy, just to know that this is interacting with the bacteria, and really completely changing the composition of your gut microbiome. I mean, we're up against a lot already in terms of like pesticides, genetically modified food, antibiotics, white processed flour, wheat products, things like that are already attacking our gut all the time. Is really no room for anything like artificial sweeteners to be, developing a little bit of a stronger force against that precious microbiome.
Let alone that having a sweet tooth can be a sign of a gut imbalance, which is a pretty crazy cycle if you think about it, because all of the artificial sweeteners are reducing our good gut bacteria, which is making us crave more, which is, allowing for yeast and different bacteria to grow, and then making us crave even more. So it's a really vicious cycle.
Totally. So, all right. Thank you for joining us on this rant. Thank you for sticking with us. And hopefully now you know that you want to stay away from, the little blue packet, the little pink packet, the little yellow packet. You want to stay away. You want to look for the aspartame potassium. You want to look for the aspartame. Sucralose is being labeled on a lot of like quote unquote health, healthy foods. And I had a client who sent me a label and said like, oh, check out this protein bar I got, or, oh, check out this, we had a recent one. I think it was like an energy drink, but it was supposed to be a natural energy drink, and it had sucralose in it. We're here fighting the fight with you. We're just as frustrated. It's insane how, these ingredients are sneaking their way in, but our job is to educate and to inform. And so with that being said, I want to conclude with talking about a couple of these more natural sweetening agents that you also might see if you're at, your local coffee shop or your local restaurant. So things like I'm seeing right now are, especially like the company In the Raw that has sugar in the raw, you might see packets of like monk fruit in the raw, or you might see packets of stevia. Give us a general take on how we should approach those.
Absolutely. So when it comes down to just like choosing a packet of sugar or a packet of artificial sweeteners, I always say grab the packet of sugar. One little bit of sugar is going to be a lot better than having continued use of these artificial sweeteners. And if sugar is not sweet enough, then there's probably a bigger issue at hand. But with that said, I think the first thing we always jump to is stevia. And while the preliminary evidence is really good, it does come from a plant. It's about 200 or so times sweeter than sugar and has been shown not to raise blood insulin levels. It's still preliminary research, right? We haven't had stevia around for years and years. So I certainly wouldn't want to have it every single day. But again, the research is really to be determined on that.
I agree. I think I'm working with clients who have tried stevia. They know it's not a good fit for them. Maybe it triggers a headache. I work with other clients that say, yep, stevia is perfectly fine. I really encourage clients to try it out, see how they feel. Ultimately, it's not something I'd love people to be using tons of on an everyday basis anyway. But I think monk fruit can be an interesting alternative too.
Absolutely. Monk fruit, they make it in drops. And that's extremely sweet as well. And so far the research on that is really positive as well. I always say, if you can retrain your taste buds, that's where the magic's going to be, and you got to put in the work. But essentially it's really just starts with kind of, maybe it's weaning off some of those artificial sweeteners slowly. So your brain, it's kind of like,
a withdrawal.
Yeah, it's a withdrawal. Your brain is addicted. And so you got to wean off that slowly. I mean, a lot of people have trouble just cutting it cold. And so weaning back slowly and slowly until fruit begins to taste sweet again, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, that's a great sign that you're on the right path. When things that, used to not feel that sweet are now suddenly almost too sweet for you, then you really know you're heading in the right direction. So again, please, share this episode with your friend, your coworker, your neighbor who you see having that daily diet soda, or, someone who you feel could benefit this, because I just don't think this information is talked about enough. And it's scary. This is a hidden neurotoxin that is working against us every sip, every bite that we're taking. And the more the more you can take care of your health, and we can all afford to be a little bit healthier in this day and age.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, You can reach us at FUNCYOUUp@physiologicnyc.com or on our Instagram at physiologicnyc.
And as always, you can follow me on my Instagram, MichelleMiller_MSACN. Thank you all again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Funk You Up. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe for more daily tips on living well.